Okay, so this first chapter was about natural selection and evolution and ecology. And so the case study was these little birds of Hawaii. And so when we are talking about islands like Hawaii and you have this kind of isolated area, you're going to have a lot of what's called endemic species. Endemic species are only going to be found in these this small area. They're only native to this one little part. So you can imagine Hawaii is an island nation all to its own, and it had 140 species of these native or endemic birds. And so a lot of problems started happening with introduced species, and then things like rats and cats were able to kill the eggs and the young, and then also the habitat destruction from development as well. And then there was an avian, which means bird, malaria that caused them problems. So they're so cute. Yay. Species, population, evolution. Species, that means they can breed and have viable offspring. Population is a group of the same species. So if you're all members of the same species and they can interbreed, then there's a population. And then, of course, evolution is change over time. Some of this that is not really prevalent on your test or the AP exam, I'm kind of go through pretty quickly. Natural selection. That is where you have this slow change over time where genes or traits that help you to survive and reproduce are passed on. It's not always who's the biggest and the strongest, it is who can live long enough to reproduce and have offspring that can also live long enough to reproduce. It's not always the most handsome or sharpest tooth, or it's can you survive long enough to reproduce. And so I like this little happy face spider. I'm going to show you the happy. See, isn't he super cute? I just think it's like a random. And there's a nene. If you wondered what that was, I know it's a rap song, but that is also, it's also a bird. So these are some kind of unique endemic species, and evolution is going to be the source of all these unique traits. Processes that we're doing as humans that we're really concerned about, things like using antibiotics, using pesticides, those are where humans come in and we are causing some issues. For example, when we start to talk about pesticides, some organisms in a population are going to be more likely not to be susceptible to the pesticides, and so they're not going to die, and they're going to pass those genes of I don't die from pesticide on to their offspring, and then you're going to have a problem with that pesticide. And so that's kind of where we're more concerned, not with just like Darwin, that's more epidemiology, but with us, we're concerned about how humans are kind of interplaying here. But Darwin and Wallace, they kind of came out at the same time, same year, published the same ideas. Darwin wrote a big old long book and had more evidence, and so that's why you hear about Darwin versus Wallace. So take that into consideration when you write a paper. Whoever supports our ideas a little bit better, they get famous. So that's how to do it. There are some premises of natural selection, and it's important that you understand those. For natural selection to work, you have to have this idea that organisms are going to have to struggle to survive and reproduce. Like life is tough, right? And so there's going to be this struggle to survive and reproduce. Organisms are going to have more offspring than they can actually survive, and then individuals of a species, they're going to have these genes that are a little bit different, and so this natural variation happens. And then because you have this natural variation, some individuals are going to be better suited for environment, and those are the ones that are going to survive and reproduce. So there's like a whole unit of biology, just real quick. Is that all sounding familiar to you as people that have been in biology? Okay, so let's get to let's get to more of the stuff that we're concerned with. So an adaptation, these are the traits that are, when you have traits that are positive and help you survive and reproduce, they're going to be passed on and become more prevalent. When you have mutations, those are going to be your accidental changes to DNA, and the non-lethal ones, the ones that do not cause death, either directly or indirectly, those are going to be the ones where natural selection is going to act upon. So the first feather, the first web foot, the first wing, those are going to start from mutations, and so that helps that organism to survive and reproduce. Those will get passed on. We had talked about directional, disruptive, and what's the other one? Stabilizing. Thank you. Those three types with the graphs from the Pogel those are on the test. And we really did a solid job talking about those in class. And so they're not on the PowerPoint. That picture is not in your book anymore. But we did that activity for a reason, and those 3 pictures are on your test. So directional selection, that's where, if all the seeds in the ecosystem are large, then the birds with the large beaks are going to survive, and it's going to go towards large beaks. So if the seeds are middle-sized, and then the middle-sized beak birds do well, that's stabilizing selection. And then if you have small and large seeds, and then you get this effect, right, where you get this weird little, that guy, that's disruptive selection. So stabilizing, if this is your original graph, stabilizing goes more toward the middle. Directional would take that graph, and it would go from here to maybe small, or it could go to large. So those are those 3 words. You should already feel pretty comfortable with them, but do look back over that if you need to before the test, because there's a series of questions based on it. So, I guess there it is. So this is directional selection only. I don't think I have pictures for the other one. But like I said, short beaks or long beaks, that's directional. Convergent evolution, not super important for apes, but similar traits. Like, for example, butterflies and bats, they both have wings. Those are totally not related, but it's handy to have wings, so that trait has appeared in the evolutionary record a couple times. Divergent evolution. Divergent evolution is going to happen where you have a common ancestor. And so here, if we're looking at these honey creepers, these are the birds from Hawaii, they have a common ancestor, and so you can actually look at them and you can see that, for example, the ones that pick bark, they have these kind of long, sort of very sharp beaks for getting into the bark. The ones that eat nectar, they have evolved certain types of beaks. The seed and fruit eaters are going to have the thicker, kind of stronger beaks. And so divergent means you start from one ancestor and you diverge. Convergent ancestry, or convergent evolution, like I said, the butterflies and the bats, those don't have a common ancestor, but they have evolved and come together and have a common trait, even though they're not related, because wings and flying is awesome. I want to fly. So this is where I sing I Believe I Can Fly. Do I do that for your class sometimes? Yeah, sorry. I don't care. Artificial selection, humans are super good at this. What we have done is we've taken something like a wolf, right? And so now you can have a chihuahua or a collie, or what is that one where you put a poodle with something else? A noodle? I'm like, what is that? That's not a, do y'all know what I'm talking about? Yeah, yeah. Okay, so we did that from a wolf. Good job, us. This is artificial selection. And do you guys know that broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, they all come from this brassica plant? And so people on purpose and created all of these vegetables for you to have to eat from crossbreeding, traditional crossbreeding. So you can see that just in hundreds of years, not over millions of years, or billions really, with evolution. In a few hundred years, we have taken and made wolves, and we've made broccoli and cauliflower, and they all came from this is a different picture, but they're not the same. But we made all these cruciferous vegetables. There's your SAT word of the day, crunchy, okay, from the brassica plant. And so humans have done this artificial selection. Biodiversity, when we're looking at organisms, biodiversity is not just how many different species, it's how many, it's also how much variation within a single species. So we want to see how many different populations are in a community, and then also how many different communities are in the area. So a lot of times people think about biodiversity, they just think about how many different species do we have. Well, but it's also variation across all these levels, with the number of species, the genes within a single species, how many populations are in a community, and then how many different kinds of communities. So it's not just that one thing. Biodiversity it exists everywhere. That's the last sentence. Sorry, I had to say it, and I had to say it sarcastically. So allopatric speciation, that's typically what happens. You can highlight that. I'll show you a picture. So highlight allopatric speciation. This. What ends up happening with allopatric speciation? And this is probably something you've done in biology. You have a nice, beautiful little forest, and you have a fruit fly. And then Maybe you have a lava flow. Maybe you have a glacier. Maybe the continents divide because you're not in Pangea anymore. Like, it could be a bunch of different stuff. But geographically, they become separated. And then over here, over time, you're going to have divergent evolution, where this population of fruit flies is going to start specializing the food that's over here. And these over here are going to become isolated and evolve into another species, perhaps. And then if something happens and this gets recolonized, like I'm sure you've heard of, what is that thing? Succession. When succession happens and vegetation grows back, even if they come back together, they're not going to be the same species anymore. So there's usually allopatric speciation, like I said, where you have a geographic separation that happens. That's how evolution, or speciation, I should say, typically works. Phylogenetic trees. This is, when you heard of the tree of life, it is when evolutionary biologists draw these things out, they really are trees. And so, I'll just talk about this for a second. If we look at the common ancestor here, there's a common ancestor. And so what ends up happening over time is you'll have these traits that come up. Like, this is a jaw. So, see that little line right there? Everything past this line has a jaw. So notice lampreys, they don't have jaws. Okay, cool. So everything over here has a jaw. Right here, lungs or a swim bladder. Everything over here has a lung or swim bladder. Sharks don't have that. 4 legs. Everything over here has 4 legs. Lungfish don't have that. A moisture retaining egg. Everything over here has that. Amphibians don't. That's why they have to live in water. Okay, these are called they're called synapomorphies. Like, you don't need to know that, but I took some paleontology classes. It was fun. But anyway, so we just have this really beautiful fossil record, and it shows these things that kind of develop over time. And like I said, this is called a phylogenetic tree. Biologists also call them cladograms. But if you take AP biology next year or whenever, like, you'll be exposed to that. So feathers, just the birds. All right, isn't that fun? These are neat. I enjoy them. Not super important on our AP exams, so I always have that in my mind, you know, for priorities. Keep my priorities straight. We can look at the phylogenetic tree and see what's going on. And y'all know that when we look at names of organisms, we have a 2-part name, genus and then species, right? There's all the ways we organize life. Do you see how I'm going through and I'm like kind of like whatever? That's because it's a whatever topic. I'm not asking you a question about this on the test. Fossils and fossil records. This was in one of the previous chapters we had talked about. It was in there only for a second. This chapter kind of went into it a little bit more. Life has existed on Earth for about 3.5 billion years. And we know from looking at the fossil record that earlier types of organisms have evolved into later types. This is a pretty important little series of things. Most species that have ever lived have gone extinct. So most species that were ever alive have actually gone extinct. And there's been several mass extinctions, right? And so when we think about the amount of life on Earth now, that is a lot. But we've had a lot of things that slowly over time have been replaced with new organisms or new species. And so most of the things on most things on Earth are extinct. So extinction, the disappearance of a species from Earth. I will add another word, extirpation. Extirpated. Extirpation is where you have a localized extinction. So if we had like open season today on, I don't know, white-tailed deer, and like all the deer in Georgia got shot, which is like unlikely. But if it did, they wouldn't be extinct everywhere. They would just be extinct in Georgia. That's called extirpation. So it's a localized extinction. The loss of a species is irreversible. So extirpation. I think that word can also be used like politically, where like somebody is sent away. Like, have you ever heard that in a social studies class? Yeah, like kind of banishment. I feel like I've heard it in a political sense, but in this class, I'm gonna turn the lights back on because you're gonna go to sleep. Like, I just know that's the thing. So sorry about that. So I actually dug up a dinosaur one time. That's not me, but human activity has really affected the rate of extinction. We use food, fiber, medicine, all this. So here's a nice little picture of a lot of things that are extinct. What causes extinction? Could be natural things. That's the thing. Could be natural things. Weather, climate change, changing sea levels. Some of that we're doing. Some of that is natural. Arrival of new species, being a small population or specialized. So this makes you very vulnerable. Okay, if you're a specialist, which is to say that maybe you're one of those honey creepers and you only eat one kind of tropical flower off of one kind of tree. If all those trees are maybe used for lumber or that area is developed, then you're going to go extinct if you specialize. If you're a generalist, like a rodent, like rats, they're going to be fine, right? They don't just eat one kind of special, beautiful tree. Humans are generalists. We have a lot of different food sources. And so if you have a small population or you're a specialist, that really does make you more vulnerable. And that just kind of makes sense when you think about it. An endemic species, this means that they only, and I kind of talked about this a second ago with the honey creepers, they only live in one little area. Okay, these make them very susceptible to extinction. Those honey creepers only live in Hawaii, so if something happens in Hawaii, you have no more honey creepers. They have small populations generally, and then island species are generally going to be endemic because they have that allopatric speciation happen. They've been geographically separated, and so usually on islands, you're going to have a lot of biodiversity, but most of it will be of endemic species, and if something happens, of course, they're not going to be found anywhere else. So, okay. Let me try that one more time. So anyway, a lot of amphibians have really small ranges, and that makes them vulnerable to extinction. So funny. Like somebody counted this, right? 40 salamander species are restricted to areas the size of a typical county. There is some little salamander species that live in one mountain in Kentucky, and that's it. Well, they're going to be more susceptible to extinction. And the fact that amphibians have that kind of permeable skin and they have to be in water, they're typically going to be more susceptible to water pollutants. So we have the endocrine disruptors in the water from pesticides or herbicides or plastics. They're going to be the first ones to be affected. So here's a Virginia little salamander, lives in one little area. Sorry, salamander, you're probably not going to make it because it's endemic and it's small and it's probably a specialist, right? So anyway, we've had 5 mass extinction events where currently scientists believe we're in our 6th one. It's important to understand that the background extinction rate is also there. And so there is this slow kind of extinction that occurs over time, constantly, because of evolution. So just from evolution, you're going to have species go extinct or be replaced. So that's normal and natural. The problem is we have, we're now, I think we're, it's in the PowerPoint later, I want to say we're 10,000 times faster as far as the extinction rate now versus the background extinction rate. So that causes concern. But there's been 5, and this is the one that killed the dinosaurs. This is the largest one ever, the Permian Triassic one. That's this guy. And that was really from climate. That was when Pangea was coming together, and it really changed the climate quite a bit, caused a lot of dry areas, very hot. So that's the largest one ever. That's your dinosaurs.
Now, what does it mean by one time? In the next slide, it talks about the 6th mass extinction. It's obviously not talking about overnight, but how much is it one time?
I don't see the word one time.
Yes, in the mass extinction events, it says episodes that killed off massive numbers of species at once.
Oh, that, I see what you're saying. So, on a geologic timescale kind of basis, you're looking within 1,000 years, 2,000 years, something like that. Even a million is a short amount of time. So, yeah, I gotcha. So 6 of mass extinction, this is kind of where humans come in, and this is where our Hippo C shows its face. The little acronym that we had used with the movie, right? Habitat loss is always the most important. Resource depletion, population growth, our development, and habitat loss is the biggest one. Overharvesting and hunting, poaching was another one. Invasive species, climate change. So Invasive species is another word for non-native species, and those are going to be we're having populations come in that are introduced by humans that are causing problems. So anyway, so 1,000 times higher than the background extinction rate. So I should have just waited and clicked the slide. I think I have heard up to 10,000, but 1,000 is good. The point is, it's a lot faster than this natural background extinction that is always occurring. It's a lot faster than that. These are little videos that don't work. So biosphere, community, ecosystem. The biosphere is just things that are alive. The community is all the species that are kind of working together in an area. Maybe they're not working together. Maybe they're eating each other. But ecosystem is living and non-living. This should be very familiar to you already. Let me know if I need to. No, you look good. Okay. So biosphere is all the living things. Ecosystem is the living and non-living things in an area. Community is all the populations that are kind of coinciding. A population is a group of a single species, and then an organism is obviously that one organism, an individual living thing. Population ecology studies populations. I think that I want to say, no, okay, we're good. There's a couple more slides, but the rest of this, when we get into population, is actually in the next unit. So we're not going to finish this whole PowerPoint. I'll ask you to save the rest of it for like the next time. So anyway, population ecology, those people study populations. A lot of the, I've had students that want to go into like being a game warden or like some kind of park management. And so a lot of those people end up doing population kind of monitoring, which I think is a cool job. Community ecology, like I said, that is, you're going to be looking at the living things, the populations that are working together. And then the ecosystem, living and non-living. So habitats, I mean, I can't, nope. So some species have different habitats based on different times, and that's where migration comes in. Yeah, we're good there. Niche, or a niche if you want to be classy. I am not classy, so I'm going to go niche. Also, I wonder if niches get stitches. Do you think that? No? It's an organism's job in the ecosystem. I think you've all heard that. It's your functional role. But it's not just what you eat, right? It's also how you're using the habitat, also with energy flow and that kind of thing. So all you're going to remember today is it's just get stitches. That's the only thing you're going to take home. Specialists, like I said, I already kind of talked about them, but specialists are going to be those organisms that have really specific needs. They're going to be extremely good at what they do, but they're going to be vulnerable. They're going to be more vulnerable to extinction. And I'm going to put more vulnerable to extinction. I don't even care if that makes a sentence. I don't care. There. They're more vulnerable to extinction. Generalists are going to be less vulnerable to extinction, and they're going to use a wide variety of food and habitat kind of resources. So the reason that mammals actually lived and survived, scientists think that they did well after that KT extinction, the one that killed the dinosaurs, is because dinosaurs were specialists. They were very large, and they were eating the vegetation. But what had happened with mammals is all the fossil record shows us at that point is that they were burrowers, and they would come out and they would kind of scavenge on things. And so because they were underground, they didn't get killed by the heat of the meteor, but then also they hadn't evolved to thrive only on large vegetation sources. And so they were able to survive and reproduce when the environment changed. So yay, mammals. The largest mammal at the time of the dinosaurs' extinction 65 million years ago was about the size of a house cat, and so now they're doing great, right? So this is where we're going to stop. So the rest of this PowerPoint, don't lose this, like you'll need it in a couple weeks, right? But population and population ecology, this part of the chapter will not be on the test, okay? So everything for the rest won't be. Let's go ahead and look at the questions at the very end. Couple of them, yeah. Here we go.
What did you say won't be on the test?
The rest of that PowerPoint. So, anyway, which of the following is not a part of the process of natural selection? You know, this will be fun. Just to kind of give you a little break, the secretaries, go get the little boards and the little markers and erasers. Have I used those yet? No? Okay. There's the little boards and erasers and markers on the back table. Get one for each person. Well, a lot of times I'll use that operative on your phone, but might as well do this. Why not? No? I just need to break the top of this. Whee! Go, materials people, go.
Oh. Yeah, like you said.
Oh, yeah, whatever. Go, secretaries, go. Okay. Go, people, go. Alright, awesome. Okay, so let's go ahead and answer this question. Which of the following is not a part of the process of natural selection? So write your answer on your board. I'll give you about 7 Mississippis. I'm feeling like that's a fair amount right now. A Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. Secretaries, is anybody out today? No? Good. Alright, what you got? Let's see. A. Also not funny. But everybody put A. Good. Once grown, organisms generally do not have... Yeah, so there's always a struggle to survive. So, circle that on your paper. What happens as a result of adaptation? And... Oh, still see some people working. Alright, let's see what you have. Looking good. Okay, so most everybody put B. Let's see, species have higher rate. Yes, and so, right, and so you want to survive. So C is, if you put C, maybe not that one. So directional selection. This is very similar to one of the questions on the test. So, directional selection. Ooh, I'm seeing some discrepancies. Okay, okay. I see a most common answer. Most common answer is probably at this point either B or D. But let's look at it. Okay, so directional selection is dog with black coats evolving white coats in colder areas. Okay, I can kind of see that. Red. Okay, B is actually stabilizing selection because you're moving from the extremes to the middle. Do you see? So C, fish evolving bigger eyes as the water gets muddier. C is directional selection. I could see that. Okay. A population of birds, some with thicker beaks. Okay, this is actually, this is disruptive. So our choices are really between A and C. I think because that is really like completely opposite. I really feel like C is a better answer. I feel like C is the best answer. But if you put A, I could understand that. But they're not going to completely like opposite change colors, right? So, allopatric speciation. Let's give this one a try. Okay, seeing some good answers. Nice work, folks. Okay, so I am agreeing with you that B is the best answer. B is the best answer to population separated by the Mississippi. Because that's going to be a geographic separation.
I thought this was something else.
Alright, so this one looks very similar to some things on the test, so let's try this one too. All right. Some early agreements. Looking strong. Okay, so C, the vast majority of species that I've ever... Yeah, yep, that's it. And next, the reason I'm taking these and going slow and giving you time, like I said, these look similar to the test me. Which of these species is most vulnerable is also a word, but vulnerable to extinction? I think this is maybe the last one and the next one is the last one. So, all right, so B, one county of the United States, right? That's salamander, though. Okay, so last one. A community is defined as what? Good. There you go. I got you. Good, good. All right, so it is the interacting species. Should we care? Probably. All right, so let's move on to the next PowerPoint. So let me get that situated. Take a little break if you need to talk with your friends. Stretch your legs, and I'll get the next one pulled up for us.
And this one that you're going to show now is not on this.
It's what?
You said this one is not going to be on this?
No. So when I was doing that PowerPoint I just did, I didn't finish it. Did you notice that? I skipped. So the part that I skipped, it's only it's maybe 20 slides or something. So that part, the population part. So when you go back, if you want to reread chapter 3, don't read the last half where it starts talking about population. Next unit is population. Okay. So if that helps.
We have to know all the different biomes.
Yes, and I'm getting to that. That I think is in this. Yeah, but that's actually really
I
important.
know them in general, but it's hard to tell.
I'm going to tell you like the things that you need to know, so don't worry. There's some definitely kind of themes to it. So, all right. Here we go. Oh, I thought you were. I saw like out of my periphery. I have that like instant teacher 5 thing going on. About that marker though. Yes, sir.
When is the test again?
The test is on the 22nd of February. It is on the 22nd. The unit 2 is on 2. All right, so chapter 4. Let's get started with this one. This is more of what we're talking about: energy flow and feeding relationships, that kind of thing, and biome. So if you're worried about that, these guys are actually taking and they are power washing some mussels. Those are mussels in a pipe that was, I think, going into a power plant or a factory. And so they are living in the water, and they have completely just covered the inside of this pipe. And so these are zebra mussels. Zebra mussels, the AP folks really like some zebra mussels, and they like to talk about ballast water. Notice it says ballast water. So when you have a boat, right? A boat, when you carry cargo across the ocean, you really need to have the right buoyancy in your boat. And so what boats do is they will take up water. Let's say they started in, I don't know, the Caspian Sea. They will take up some water and put it in the ballast, which are like these places you hold water. It'll have the right buoyancy based on the cargo, and it'll help you float across the ocean, all right? And then when they get to port, they'll actually discharge that ballast water. And so those little zebra mussels that were coated inside that pipe, those hitched a ride all the way from Europe. And now they're an invasive species in the Great Lakes and like throughout the Mississippi Basin, Ohio River, all this, okay? And so what ended up happening, sometimes that's called ballast water. That sometimes the AP people will actually call it bilge water. They will ask you about this. I promise. I've been there. I've seen it. And so that ends up carrying these invasive species, these aquatic invasive species, across the ocean. So sort of problematic. And so you can see within 20 years' time, they had invaded 30 states, whereas in the late 80s, they weren't even a thing yet. So especially if you go out west, like, you'll see signs that say, if you have a boat, it has to be inspected before you can put it in the lake. We don't even have, out west, they don't have problems with zebra mussels yet, and so they're trying to prevent it by doing inspections of boats. So anyway, here are the zebra mussels. You can see that they cause economic damage because they will crowd up inside of these intake pipes. And then also, they're going to compete with native mussels. And so they will suffocate these native clams and mussels by growing on them. And they also are filter feeding, which means they are taking the plankton out of the water, filter feeding the stuff that's floating in the water. And so they're using the native species food source, but then they also suffocate them And so you have problems. When we had talked about Hippo C, the I is for invasive species, and you can see how this would cause species to get or to go extinct, right? So competition happens when you have both species are harmed in competition, if you think about it, because they're both going to be vying for the same resource, and so that's going to hurt both of them. You have exploitative. Do you know what exploit means? What does it mean?
Take advantage of something for your own benefit.
Or just to use, yeah. So if you exploit someone, you're using them. That's a great way of putting something in a paper, right? I mean, there's just like I said, I have like 20 words that I just pull out, right? Discrete. Did I tell you about discrete? Was that your class? No. Oh, that's chemistry. Sorry. If you take about 4 or 5 classes with me, you'll make a perfect score on the essay. Just kidding. So anyway, exploitative relationships include predation, which is obviously like predator eating prey. Parasitism, which is parasites, and then herbivory, which is like where herbivores eat plants. So mutualism is where both species benefit, and then like classic mutualistic relationship is like bees and how they get the nectar from the flowers, but then they also help to pollinate the flowers. So intraspecific competition versus interspecific. That will be on the test, and you'll expect you to know it. Intra means the same species, and so a good example of intraspecific competition is where you're competing for mates, right? Because only organisms of the same species would compete with for mates. Anyway, interspecific competition, that could be food, space, water, all these things. Also, organisms of the same species are going to be competing for water. They're going to be competing for habitat because they have the same niche, right? If you're in the same species, you have the same niche. So you're going to have not just mates, but that's kind of a really common example. Interspecific, these are 2 different organisms. Like an interstate takes you between 2 different states. Am I speaking your language? Okay, not highlighting that, but feel free to if you want to. When species compete, 2 things can happen. One thing that can happen is one is going to do awesome and the other one's just going to die. That's competitive exclusion. So right now with those zebra mussels, they are completely displacing these native mussels in the Great Lakes area. And so the native mussels are becoming endangered, and so that's competitive exclusion. You introduce this new species and the other one just can't really swing it. So that happens. Species can also coexist. Species coexistence. That's where everybody learns to live beside each other and they get along. So, I have a really funny picture for this. I can't wait to show you. It's kind of hilarious. And so, what ends up happening with species coexistence, it'll be better if I show you the picture. Oh, it's like way on down here. Okay, I'll get to it. I'm going to show you now. By the way, these names of these birds are so funny. I think we just need to take a minute and look at the names of these birds. I mean, it's almost like, it's just hilarious. So the white-breasted nuthatch. Like, that's the best, like, what kind of cut down would that be? You white-breasted nuthatch. I mean, that's funny. Anyway, so the white-breasted nuthatch. I can't even say it. It climbs down the trunk of the tree. So, like, this is the common resource, this tree. And so what they've done is all these species are coexisting. See, they all got bullied because of their weird names by their friends, and so they just all come to live together, kind of like that, I don't know, Misfit Toys. That's funny. If you don't get it, I'm sorry. Anyway, the pileated woodpecker digs deeply into the wood to find large insects. So this guy's coming down looking for insects. That guy's digging in there. The brown creeper. Hey, I see why he got kicked out of where he came from. He climbs up the tree looking for tiny insects. That's what he's looking for. Okay. And then the yellow-bellied sapsucker. Look at that thing in the sap. It's on PowerPoint. He rolls of holes and consumes sap and insects. So they can see how they're coexisting, and they're all sharing this common resource, right? And so they could see what ends up happening is they could all possibly do all of these things. Their niches, their larger niche is called their fundamental niche. Let me show you this. They're like all of those birds could probably do all of those things. They could all drill in there, or they could all climb down or up. They could all do all those things. But what they end up doing is they end up kind of sharing that common resource, and then you can see that their niches end up being smaller than they could have been because they end up just kind of specializing in one little part of that tree. So this larger niche is called their fundamental niche, and what you actually end up doing, like in that tree, is your realized niche. And so there's those words. You can highlight them. I know I'm going all over the place. I don't care. Whee! And like I said, that realized niche is going to be due to competition, and that's where you're going to have a species coexistence. And so you're going to end up taking and using less of your niche than you really could. Did I hit all those ones I skipped? Are we not at the tree now? Yeah. All right, good. Character displacement. In the last PowerPoint, I showed you the honey creepers. Apparently a lot of birds are creepers. Shady birds. But I showed you the honey creepers of Hawaii, and you could actually look at the bird, and if it had a long beak that was kind of curved, it was probably a nectarivore, which means they eat nectar. Okay? If it has a big, thick beak, you can look at it and say, oh, that bird eats seeds, because it looks like it has a strong beak. And so the most famous, I'm not even going to try to draw a giraffe. Okay, I will. I'm a big, no wait, that's a different song. So there's a giraffe. Yep. Nope, okay. I was doing good for, there's your giraffe. So you can look at a giraffe. That's good. You can look at a giraffe if you had a real giraffe. You could look at a giraffe and be like, oh, it has a long neck. I bet it eats trees off the top. I bet it eats leaves off the top of a tree. So that's character displacement. It's where the physical appearance of an organism matches what it's doing in the ecosystem. Or you could read all this. The competing species diverge in their physical characteristics due to the evolution of traits best suited to the resources they use. But that means that you can look at it and be like, oh, okay, it uses that resource. So I need to write my own little book and just be like, everything for, well, I don't want to say, I guess somebody already wrote a book called Everything for Dummies. But you're not dummies, I'm just trying to help you. So predation, like I said, predators eat prey. I feel like I need to talk about that much. The zebra mussels are definitely doing this. They are, they're not necessarily eating the native mussels, but they are eating the phytoplankton and zooplankton. Do y'all know what this is? Have you heard these words before? Yes. Did you do this? Okay, so on your test, you're going to miss a question if I don't talk to you about it. So pay attention. Phytoplankton, phyto means plant, right? So these guys, this is like 50% of your oxygen on Earth is coming from phytoplankton in the ocean. This is the base of the ocean food chain. These are guys that are floating around. They're doing photosynthesis. They're making glucose. They're primary producers. They're that. They're like the little tiny floating plants of the ocean. They're the base of the ocean food chain. Zooplankton, when you go to a zoo, what are you looking at? Okay, so guess what? These zooplankton, they're consumers and they eat phytoplankton. So zooplankton are actually primary consumers. You catch me? So if I had a fish, that looks pretty good. If I had a fish that ate a zooplankton, what would this fish be on the food chain? Second. Did you get that? Okay, maybe write that down. People always miss that, and then they're like, "Screaming, I don't understand." And then I draw the fish, and then they be quiet. So anyway, zebra mussels, they are eating this phytoplankton and zooplankton, the base of the food chain here. And then also, some of the organisms like these ducks, they're figuring out how to eat them, which is good. Yeah. Predator and prey relationships can drive evolution. Yeah, that's fine. There's nothing else to really add to that. We've seen this before. This was a thing. Remember that? Yeah. So what you end up having here is you have your prey population, and ends up affecting your predator population. And what's going to happen is if the prey population crashes, so will the predator. I don't feel like I need to spend a whole lot of time on that because we already did that. Natural selection is going to make predators better hunters because those that can hunt well will live and, you know, reproduce. Not rocket science, really. So prey are going to have these stronger selection pressures. And so what ends up happening is you have this coevolution. I don't know if this is on the next slide. What happens is I make your PowerPoint and I print them out, but then I go back and look at the test, and so like stuff's in my head, and I just want to make sure I tell you. But coevolution, so what you end up having is these prey evolve these elaborate defenses against being eaten, but then the predators become better predators, and so they co-evolve. One gets stronger and faster, so the prey gets stronger and faster. And maybe the prey predators get the thicker teeth and or stronger teeth, and then maybe the prey get thicker hides. You know, so it just kind of goes back and forth. And so sometimes that's called an evolutionary arms race. If this is on the next slide or something, don't worry about it. But and that's just where they're in this back and forth kind of battle between, you know, who has the better, I guess, offenses and who has the best defenses with the predator and the prey. Pretty interesting. And so there are certain ways to keep from getting eaten, and I'll tell you about those. Crypsis is another word for camouflage, and so here is a gecko that has kind of sort of hidden. I saw the coolest video of that octopus, and it looked just like seaweed. I don't have that right now, but I was like, oh, that's crypsis. So it's on Twitter. Anyway, warning coloration, bright colors that shows that they're dangerous and or poisonous. Mimicry. This is actually a caterpillar that looks like a snake. Thumbs up, guy. You're doing a good job there. I mean, wouldn't that be good? I don't know if I want to look like a snake though. Parasitism. That's where the parasite is going to depend on the host. Some are free living, like mosquitoes, for example, are free living. Some are actually live within the host. And you guys know that symbiotic means close, right? Do we have that discussion? No. And so symbiotic, people always think symbiotic means like good, but symbiotic means close. So these guys right here, tapeworms are actually an example of a symbiotic relationship because they live inside you. Yay. Other symbiotic relationships involve like corals. Corals are a symbiotic relationship between like little stinging or animals, and then also like an algae. So we'll get into that later. But symbiotic just means in a close relationship. That's fun. So that's an example of parasitism. Those are lampreys. They're sucking on that trout. I'll just let that soak in. Okay. Moving on.
Looks like he has hair.
Huh?
Looks like he has hair.
Ew. So parasitoids, that's just fun fact for Jeopardy. You don't need to know about that. Coevolution, this is what I was talking about a second ago. It can happen between predator and prey. It can also happen between parasites and hosts. So, you know, highlight all that. Like I said, I had seen that on the test. So I want to make sure I got it across to you. But they're just going to each evolve new responses in relation to each other. It could be with predator and prey, also with predator and prey. So I think I said that twice. I mean parasite and host and predator and prey. There you go. Herbivory, if you want, I think that sounds so fancy. Herbivory. It's just where animals are going to feed on the tissues of plants. And there are certain defenses for that. Chemicals, thorns, spines, you know, no big deal. That's easy. Isn't he so pretty? So caterpillars they eat a lot of leaves, and so he has warning coloration, so don't eat him, right? Mutualism and symbiosis. I'm just ruining all my lecture by telling you beforehand. Mutualism is where both species are going to benefit. It can be close contact, so that's symbiosis. But symbiosis means close physical contact. Symbiosis does not mean good. Anyway, so your microbes in your digestive tract, they are helping you to digest your food. You have these mycorrhizae. I always feel like I'm saying that wrong. Probably am. Try my best. They actually are plant roots. This is really important in a second when we get to talking about the nitrogen cycle. It is the root nodules on legumes, which are like beans, that help to convert nitrogen into something usable. Yeah, we're gonna get to that. But if you've seen this word before, you might have seen it when you were making your folder, which I graded those and put them in the grade book. But maybe I'll try to get them back to you. When I have a second, right? Pollination, that is, like I said, the most common example of mutualism. But it is not symbiotic because they do not live in close proximity to each other. Pollination, yay! Community, I already told you about a community. Nope. So trophic levels. You have producers, you're going to have consumers, and so you can have a primary consumer. If the primary consumer gets eaten, then it is eaten by a secondary consumer. And then if that gets eaten, it is eaten by a tertiary consumer, and that is enough for me. And you probably already know that. If you already know that, don't write it down. But you have primary, those are going to be your herbivores, right? Secondary consumers are going to be carnivores, and tertiary consumers are also going to be carnivores. Can you see I'm making that connection? So.
What if you have more than one or more than three?
Usually because only 10% of the energy is passed on at each trophic level, you don't. But I guess, sure. I don't know that it has a special name. And so here is a, okay. So here is the food web, and it kind of shows all these different, like, parts of a food chain, food web. Alright, so I'm going to magnify this and take it through. Over here on the right-hand side, we have a terrestrial ecosystem, and we have detritivores. Detritus is dead stuff and poop. So like leaf litter and poop, really, that's what I'm talking about when I say detritus. And so you have detritivores that eat that. Decomposers are going to be the ones that are really may be living off of the carrion. Remember what carrion is, right? So those are really important for nutrient cycles. But if we go to the bottom of the food chain, we're going to have producers and terrestrial, which means a land ecosystem. You know, you might have a plant like grass. In the aquatic ecosystem, that's where your phytoplankton are. Okay, so these are little things floating around, very microscopic, but also very important. Your primary consumers might be a grasshopper on land, might be zooplankton, not zooplankton, right, but zooplankton in the water. The secondary consumers might be a little rodent on land, might be a fish in water. And then your tertiary consumers might be a hawk on land, and maybe a cormorant in an aquatic ecosystem. And then you're also going to have your detritivores and decomposers in the water. Like, all the delicious seafood that I like are detritivores. Like, if you enjoy lobsters and scallops and clams and stuff, they're really eating sort of filter feeding, like, to tiny plankton, or they're eating dead stuff. And I don't know what they're doing, but they're delicious. Thank you for eating that for me. Producers, I'm going to go through this part pretty quickly. They make their own food. Those are some examples. Primary consumers, that's another word, like I said, for herbivores. Okay. Secondary consumers is another word for carnivores. If you feel like you need to highlight this, then please do. I want to make sure I have enough time to talk through this tricky stuff, the biomes, the cycles. Tertiary consumers, and then you're going to have people or animals like us that are consumers of both plants and animals, and those are omnivores. Detritivores scavenge waste, yay, or dead bodies. Decomposers are going to break down stuff. Detritivores eat detritus. So let me get that word. Detritus is another word for dead stuff. So, detritus. Fancy way of saying something gross. Good job, whoever made that word up.
So is a detritivore just a more specific description of the type of decomposer?
Depending on the source that you're looking at, they kind of use them interchangeably, to be honest with you. But you should be familiar with both words. So anyway, when we're going to look at the trophic levels, only about 10% of the energy is passed on each one. You guys that did your math, when you did the math on each level of the pyramid, all your answers should have been around 10. Like one of them was maybe 15, but they were around 10% when you did the percent, right? And so you had to take that part and divide by whole times about 100. Your answer should have been around 10. And then there was that one where you had to skip one. You had to, at the very top, I think you should have gotten around 1%. when you I don't remember what was at the top of the pyramid, but if you haven't finished that math, there was one problem that got you to skip like a step in the trophic pyramid, and you should have gotten something around 1%. So are you feeling me on that? Remember? Okay. So that was sort of the content purpose of that. The purpose of that also was to do math. So anyway, connecting back to the environment, if you're a vegetarian, you're going to have a lower ecological footprint because of that loss of energy at each trophic level. And then there's other things like refrigeration of the meat. There's also things like packaging and processing of the meat. And so we have climate change issues because of methane from the cows, right? If we're talking about cows. And then what about the waste from the chickens? And maybe that will get into water and cause problems. So there's huge issues with eating meat as far as, on an environmental level. I'm not telling you to be a vegetarian. I'm just telling you that there's a little bit more to it. So if we look, this is 3 things. This shows me 3 things. And notice there's no units. So this could be it could be a pyramid of numbers. And so when I say that, this could be respective numbers of organisms. So I could have 1,000 plants, 100 grasshoppers, 10 squirrels, and 1 hawk. That's the number of organisms, relatively speaking. So this pyramid could be numbers of organisms. It could also be a biomass pyramid. So that would mean that I would have 1,000 kilograms of plants, 100 kilograms of grasshoppers, 10 kilograms of squirrels, and 1 kilogram of hawk, relatively speaking. Then it can also be an energy pyramid. And this is what we use it for. And that's going to be, I have 1,000 kilocalories of grass, 100 kilocalories of grasshoppers, 10 kilocalories. So if I, actually found the energy in each of these. So an energy pyramid. So when you see these pyramids, it works not just for the energy, but also works for the number of organisms and the actual mass of organisms. Yes, ma'am?
What was the unit for biomass?
Should be kilograms, but so it can either be kilocalories, kilograms, or just actual number of organisms. So that's important to realize that it's not just energy; it could be a few different things. Food chain versus a food web. Food web is going to be more complex. A food chain is just this eats that, that equals that, done. It's very simple. A food web shows those complex interconnections because most organisms have more than one food source. And so not anything huge to mention here, just this is more complex. Keystone species, super important. We talked about them when we had discussed wolves in Yellowstone. So the wolves of Yellowstone, they help to provide a constant and more consistent availability of carrion or carcasses. They help to control the coyote population so that the little pronghorn deer would do better. They also help to keep the elk population down so that the aspens and willows could do well, and then the beavers could build their dams again. Am I ringing some bells here for you? Okay, so the definition of keystone species, they're not always a top predator, but they typically are, but they don't have to be. They're just anything that has a strong or wide-reaching impact, way out of proportion of how many organisms there actually are. So some things like a beaver, for example, they could even kind of be, they're called ecosystems engineers sometimes because they change the habitat and make ponds, but they could, in a sense, they could also be kind of a keystone species because even if there's just a few of them, think about the way they're changing the ecosystem and how that affects the moose that like to live in the water, for example, or some of the fish that like to live, or the ducks that live in the water. So it doesn't have to be a top predator, usually is, but they just have way more impact than you would expect from the number of organisms present. And so it usually is going to significantly alter the food web if you remove them. On the AP exam, they will expect you to know that sea otters live off the coast of California and Oregon, and they are keystone species. They will expect you to know exactly what I'm about to tell you. So, sea otters, what they do is they eat these sea urchins. These sea urchins are these little prickly guys. So cool. I went to the aquarium. I have like a season pass. I don't even think that's what it's called, but I don't care. I have a yearly membership. A season pass to the aquarium. That's how you know you're a nerd. But what they actually have like a big sign that says that they're sea otters. Have you been to see the okay? And they actually have like a sign that says they're keystone species. And I was like, yes, my life is complete. So anyway, the sea otters, they live off the coast of I'm gonna write that. They live off the coast of California and Oregon. California and Oregon coast. I don't know what my all of a sudden have the sharp edges. I need to replace the battery probably. They live off the coast of California and Oregon, and so what they end up doing though is they eat the sea urchins. If they're not there, what ends up happening? Look, it's like, where'd you go? So the sea otter, when they're not there though, the sea urchins go a little too crazy, and they eat all the kelp forest. So this ecosystem is actually called a kelp forest. It's called the kelp forest. That's the name of the ecosystem that they are keystone species of. And so the reason they're called the keystone species, though, if you have like Roman arch, right, and you pull that top stone out, that top stone is called the keystone. If you pull that out, the whole arch falls. That's why they're named that. Sea otters eat sea urchins, which if they don't, the sea urchins eat all the kelp, then you kind of can't have a kelp forest. This happens in Oregon and California, and that's that. So we really did a pretty in-depth study with the wolves. Wolves are on the AP exam, but so are sea otters. So there you go. I'm sorry that I have to be like the messenger for the College Board and tell you all the tricks, but there are so many. Okay, so did you see where I took out that keystone and everything fell apart? So that could be an example of a Trophic Cascade. So if you have your top predator at these high trophic levels, if something happens to them, and it doesn't have to be a sea otter, it could be something like a lion or tiger, it could be a wolf, whatever. When you remove those species, those prey animals like the elk in Yellowstone that went crazy, or like the sea urchins, they are going to, their populations aren't going to be kept in check anymore, and then they're going to overeat the vegetation. They're also going to be prone, like something like white-tailed deer. When we go out and we remove something like coyotes, for example, that may eat them, their population gets too high, and so mountain lions, things like that, that keep grazing animals in check. And so that's what I was talking about, an ecosystem engineer, when they actually go in and physically modify the environment. Sometimes these could be classified, if you wanted to, you could classify them as keystone species because they have that big impact. So, all right, disturbance. So a disturbance could be something like a tornado, hurricane, fire. Some ecosystems are pretty resistant. Some are not. But resistance and resilience, we're just really talking about how well ecosystems can handle disturbances and how well they bounce back. It's not just this one slide? Yeah. Alright, whatever. Did you see how I kind of like, it's like, whatever? Did you see? You know what I did is when I printed y'all's, because it was so big, I went ahead and I didn't, yeah, I took out some. Are we on the same page now? Yeah. Okay, cool. So succession. Primary succession and secondary succession, those are two things that you should be familiar with. Let me show you a picture. So what we have here is we have a lava flow. I'm going to go back to those words, so don't freak out. When you have a lava flow, so lava, when you have something like, what else could cause primary succession? Oh, glacier. When you have barren rock and you have no soil, what you're going to end up having is you're going to have primary succession. No soil in place equals primary succession, because you're going to have to start with step 1. That says succession. Those are S's. Alright, so anyway, primary succession, you're going to have to start with barren rock and you have to form soil. And so if you look at this little picture, there's kind of some mosses and lichens growing on this barren volcanic rock, and they're going to chemically weather it. They're going to secrete acids, and they're going to chemically weather the rock. And over time, it's going to start to make soil. Okay, so that's primary succession when you have to kind of start at step one, right? Making soil. Some disturbances, like wildfires, maybe something like human development projects, they're going to leave soil in place. So anyway, going back to this succession, it's just where you go through this series of steps, and over time you're going to form soil and you're going to have vegetation. If you have all vegetation and soil life gone, then you're going to have to go through primary succession. It's built from scratch. Oh, drying lakes. Yeah, drying lakes don't have soil, so there's another one for you. Pioneer species are the first ones to come in. They're generally mosses and lichens. I just showed you a picture of that. Also classified as pioneer species is conifer trees, like pine trees. If you've ever seen a field get cleared, the first kind of tree that will grow back is a pine tree, right? And then the hardwoods like oaks and maples and things, they'll grow up in that shade. Now, sometimes you have disturbances, and they don't remove all the soil and vegetation. So secondary succession will happen in that case. And so you may have something like farming. Farming leaves soil, right? Farming, logging, fires. They're going to have soil there. So what you won't have to have the mosses and lichens come in and secrete acids and make soil, but you'll have your conifers and so you'll have grasses, then ferns and conifers come in. They'll be your pioneer species. The Climax Community is kind of that end result where you kind of become stable. So let me show you a picture of that. And so if you start with primary succession, you're going to have, I'm going to draw it in here. If you have primary succession, you're going to have mosses and lichens. And they're going to make the soil for you. So that's primary succession. From here over is secondary succession. Primary succession would do that, and then all this, okay? But so this is secondary succession. And this is your climax, right? Your climax community. It's sort of where it becomes stable, and you're it's going to reach a point where you're not going to see these drastic changes anymore. It's going to kind of stay in the same situation. Have y'all heard of primary secondary succession before? A little bit, yeah. So, figured so. And honestly, if it had, your semester is shorter than the first semester, and then also it's very cold outside. Usually I go on a walk and show you this, but it is 37 degrees outside. So, and you have 3 less weeks to get ready for the AP exam. So, anyway, that's not a big deal right here. Invasive species. These are these non-native or exotic organisms that do really well, spread really quickly, and sometimes they're intentionally brought in, and so sometimes they can be accidentally brought in. That's like my zebra mussels. Chestnut blight. My husband is such a nerd, but he was telling me about this chestnut blight, and this was before I taught AP Environmental, but like from Europe, I think, there was this disease of chestnut trees, and it came across the Atlantic, and it literally killed every single one of the American chestnut trees. Every single one, killed them all. And that was like a really popular wood for like furniture. We don't have any now. So kind of crazy. Sometimes people bring in and introduce species on purpose. Honeybees are from Europe, so like most honeybees are Italian. And so, you know, they make pizza and have an accent. It's great. I'm trying to throw a little humor in there. So let's take a look again at those zebra mussels, okay? There's also something called Quagga Mussels. For whatever reason, the AP exam people just like to talk about mussels. They go to the gym. So, alright, the zebra mussels are the red dots. The green dots are Quagga mussels. Quagga. And so you can see, I mean, this map would have been blank as far as like the dots before 1988. And so you can see how they spread. And so they started, they were introduced in the Great Lakes area, and you can see how they spread along the rivers. They're not in Georgia yet, and you see out west, they're much less prevalent. And so when you go out west, I've traveled out west quite a good bit, and you go to lakes or parks or whatever, they have these stations and they have to inspect your boat before you get in there, and they're trying to prevent these from getting spread. So it's pretty interesting because you saw the devastation that happens because of them. All right, so let's look at the other picture and kind of see what the ecological problems are. If I go over here, as far as like humans and economic problems, they clog up pipes. Some organisms are going to do better. For example, bottom-feeding fish are going to do great. Phytoplankton, and zooplankton, those populations are going to go down. So anything that eats plankton, their populations are going to suffer because they'll be competing for that resource with the zebra mussels. And then this invasive species, the zebra mussel, doesn't have any predators. It doesn't have any diseases in the area, so they're going to do great. Native mussels and clams, their populations are going to decline. Aquatic plants, though, they're going to be doing good because the water is going to be clear because these things are filter feeding out the plankton that can discolor the water. So pretty interesting, kind of that interplay there. So you can, I think it's so funny. You can stress them out. You can remove them manually. You can apply chemicals. This would be difficult. This sounds a little crazy. You can introduce native predators or diseases. Guess what happens when you just like willy-nilly introduce another species to control a species that's already out of hand?
Then it gets
Yeah, so that what's it called is non-target effects, and so it's called biocontrol. Where you're bringing in a predator of something, and maybe that predator of zebra mussels might like those native mussels a little bit better. Maybe those taste a little bit better, so then you're gonna have a problem, right? So this is kind of hard to do. Yes, sir.
Well, I forget what it was called, but wasn't it the pine nettle bug that was introduced to Epicutsu?
Yeah.
Excuse me, Miss Freeman?
Yes, ma'am.
I need CI summers to check out.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
So anyway, prevention is better. You don't really know what can happen when you start introducing things. Ecological restoration. When you restore an old car, like if you're restoring a 57 Chevy, like are you gonna go out and get like 20-inch rims and like some lights under the undercarriage and like is that no. So anyway, restoration means you put it back like it was. Okay, so ecological restoration, if we had a wetland, for example, that's a big thing. That's on the test. I don't know if it's in your PowerPoint, I'm going to tell you. The Everglades Restoration Project is trying to re-put the Everglades like it was, okay? It's like the largest restoration project in the United States. But you're putting it back the way it was, in the condition before it was, there we go. Before it was degraded. So it's expensive, it's hard to do. But sometimes you'll hear a word like, trying to think of, like, reclamation. For example, land reclamation is like, I have a landfill, I guess we'll make it a park now after we bury all the trash. Like, that's not gonna be what it was. So you reclaim the land for a different purpose. We'll get into that a little bit later, but I want to make sure we're familiar with that. Make sure you look up the Everglades. Prairie restoration. That's a huge. Oh, it's right here. Yeah, I got it. I put it on here for you. We'll start here tomorrow. Bye. I put my clock on woodland time yesterday, and so now like it's actually right, and I'm used to being a little slow. To be continued.